What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be covering more of the player controller and match flow logic. Yet again, I know we've been doing a lot of these episodes in a row, but I'm going to try and categorize things from now on when I can, and knock them out in a row so that we can just be done with it and go on to the next system. So today we're going to be focusing on skipping stage intros. We have the ability to pause the game or skip character entrances based on the match state, but something else that we need to do is be able to skip the stage intros as well. So if we are to press the start button during a stage intro, we go immediately into the character entrances. The match flow and the match states will also line up and be in the appropriate values. We've also fixed an issue on the main menu. We were able to pause before when on the main menu due to some match state stuff. So we'll get that fixed up where we make sure we can't pause in the menu even when initially starting the game for the first time. And there you go. So that's how our match flow is going to work. We're going to be able to skip all of our things now, our stage intros, our character entrances, and then use the button for pausing the game or other actions depending on what we decide. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Today we're on episode 127 of the fighting game tutorial series, and we have done so much work so far, but we have plenty more to do. If you'd like to get caught up, feel free to click this playlist. This iCard right here in the top right corner, that is the playlist to the entire fighting game tutorial series, and it stays current, so you can check it out every week when it gets updated. You can also check out this iCard right here, which is for the previous match flow episode, so you can see how we were able to skip the character intros. Otherwise, we can go ahead and get started. So what we're going to do today is figure out how we can skip these stage intros, even though some stages don't have them in this setup, or some have longer ones, some have different cameras, so they're a little bit more advanced than others, and we can do it all with one nice method. So we're going to go to our blueprint interface today. So we've made a few of them, and basically blueprint interfaces are functions that you can make that can be filled out wherever. So you can call them from classes, and you can also figure out what classes or levels or blueprints can either call them or can fill out specific logic for them. And so we want the logic to be specific to each level BP in case the level blueprints are different. So in this case, what we need to do is go to our... I have a level streaming interface. We set up this blueprint interface, and we only had the load level function in here. This allowed us to load levels as we move things around. So if we're going from the main menu to a certain stage, we took in the level name and loaded the level. That worked perfectly. We also had a trigger load level function at one point. If you're familiar with the series, you might remember that. That was where we were forcing loads before level streaming was fully finished. So we're in that blueprint, if that jogs your memory. What we want to do is add a new function today. We don't care about the old ones. I was just saying that to try and get you to remember the purpose of this. So we need a new function, and I'm calling it skip stage intro. So you can hit add new right here, and you can make different things depending on what type of blueprint you're in here. So here you can only make functions, and that's what we want. So make a new function. I don't have any parameters or anything. It's a basic function. I just called it skip stage intro. It's literally that simple. You don't fill out any logic in an interface. Okay, so make this the skip stage intro. And what we can do is use this in all of our level blueprints so that when we call a specific function, we can call this blueprint interface function, which triggers the event in the level blueprint, and it will skip the correct sequence, or it will stop the stage intro from playing. All right, so here's our level streaming interface. That's done. Now, what we need to do before anything else is make sure that we can even call this event in the correct spot. To do that, we can include and implement this interface in the specific level blueprints that we want to have this. Now, in the case of this game, I showed you the first stage, which has a stage intro. The second stage, I've never set a stage intro up for. It still works in terms of functionality. It will still play. We can have it without stages, or without stage intros. They are not required. But for the stages that do have it, like I have this one as well, you can see that if I'm pressing the start button, I'm not skipping the stage intro, and that's because we haven't set that one up. So we'll do that one together. Let me show you how this works. Go into the level blueprints. We don't need the main menu, but you do need any level blueprint that has a stage intro that you want to skip. The one I started with was the side scroller example map. Now, if I go to my class settings, I have this section called interfaces. These may be shut, but you still have this section, and you have inherited and implemented. Inherited means that this blueprint has a parent that is implementing an interface. It shouldn't have any in the level blueprint unless you did something specific to make that happen. For us in the series, we haven't done that. But we want to make sure that we have the level streaming interface here. You can go through all of your levels, or all the ones that are going to have stage intros, and make sure that it has that. You notice that we didn't actually need these for the other functions that we've done. So like the refinery doesn't have a stage intro, and I don't have an interface implemented. So make sure that you do add them. To add them, all you do is go to implemented interfaces, click add, and then find the one you want. For me, I've called it level streaming interface. It's not in the list because I've already selected it, but it's the level streaming interface. So I'm going to go ahead and show you everything in the side scroller example map, and then we will go through how to do it from scratch on the Trail of the Wise map. That's the one that has an intro, but I can't skip it. So let's go to the side scroller example map. You see that I have the interface added. What we can do now is we can go ahead and grab this event and determine the logic we want to happen in it. So, quick rundown of the level blueprint. What we do is get rid of the loading screen, stop the music that was coming before, play the proper music based on the stage we're on, set the map state to be the stage intro, because we have a stage intro on this map. Then, we have a camera on the stage that plays a cinematic sequence. We might even have multiple cameras depending on how we set it up. And we're just, for now, grabbing the first player controller and forcing them to look at that camera. Then we're playing the sequence. Once it is finished, it says the level is streamed in, and we call this function on the game mode to know we are ready to start the game, spawn the characters, all that good stuff. Okay, so what we are really after here is we are going to try to get to this function when we press the input to skip the stage intro. That's really our main goal here, is to stop the sequence that is playing and then trigger the next logic, which will trigger the character entrances. So, I've already done it here, but I have my event skip stage intro, which that is here. That is our level streaming interface function that we added. So basically, once this function gets called, here's what I do to it. I call stop on the sequence player. The way we get the stage intro to work, and how we set up initially, is the sequence player plays the little movie. So it moves the camera around and goes to different spots that we've shown and we've set up in the editor. This bind event on finish means once this movie has fully played, we'll go ahead and call this event. Alternatively, we can actually call stop on the sequence player. And it will literally go to the end of the movie. Once we do that, we can go ahead and call stage intro finished. Okay, so if you go ahead and disconnect this and play, you can see if we skip, there's going to be a little bit of an issue because when we stop it, the on-finished event doesn't get called here. So when we manually are stopping the movie, we have to make sure that we are calling the stage intro finished, or basically we're going to, at the least, we're going to connect to this section, right? We need to still get the other functions that are going to play normally once the movie ends. So when we're skipping it, we have to make sure this logic is still hit. So I'm stopping the movie, and then I'm calling this event right here. All right. Now, it's literally that simple in the level blueprints. We do have to figure out when we can call it and how, but we'll get to that in a second. Let's set up the Trail of the Wise. So you can see I haven't set this up yet. So I'm going to go to my class settings. I'm going to add my level streaming interface. And now I have access to these events that are in the level streaming interface. Now you won't be able to just like bring this on here because if the function is not marked as blueprint callable, this is just trying to be a call to that function. This isn't filling out the event. So instead what you have to do is type in the name of the event and select the one that says event. So event skip stage intro. That's the one we want. And now we can fill out the logic that we actually want to do when this event is called. So remember, what we have to do is we have to grab our sequence player. I have one for this map as well. Trail of the Wise Sequence Master. And I can drag off the sequence player. We can even do a reroute node, make it look nicer. Okay, and we can drag off of it and type stop. Stop. Now when we stop it, add another reroute node. When we stop it, it's going to stop the sequence player. It's also going to do things like stop the movie, which will make it so that the camera just looks into the blank space like you saw before. So remember, we have to then call the correct function to then proceed with the proper logic once that movie has ended. So we have to just call our stage intro finished. Once you do that, we should be able to skip now. You won't be able to just yet because you haven't set everything up yet, but let's test it, make sure it works on my end. So make sure we set it up correctly. So during the stage intro for Trail of the Wise, I should be able to press the start button, and now you see I jump immediately to the character entrances. You could do a little fade or a little effect to make it look a little bit nicer, not just flick over there. Something we can even cover later in the series, but that's good enough for now. We can now close that, and we have to go over the actual logic to call this event from the button press. We're almost at that point, but one more thing before we get there. Let's go back to our base player controller in the code. Yet again, we have this function that gets called when we press essentially our start button, either our start button on our controller or like the P on the keyboard. And it calls this perform start input logic. Now, we had logic in here that checked to see, it got the game mode, make sure it was valid. And then what we were doing is we were getting the match state and determining if it was stage intro, a character entrance, or if we should pause the game. Well, there's two things here that are important for this specific episode. We don't really care about any of this logic for today's episode. This is all stuff we've covered in previous episodes. But the logic right here, where we have the match state equal stage intro, and we call skip stage intro, we're going to be using this event today. So this is a blueprint implementable event we set up in the game mode.h. So the fighter template game mode.h, we have this skip stage intro. And so we can call it in the game mode, and then we can fill out the logic in the blueprint. So that's what we're going to be doing today to actually trigger that event that we made with the interface. But let's also add a small little bug fix here. Remember I said we would be fixing being able to pause while we're on the main menu? So what we need to do is make sure that if the match state is not equal to default, then go into all this stuff. So really everything that's in this function, we don't want to do if the match state is default. We don't even want to do any other comparisons because default should always be skipped from this. Unless you have something bound to that key, you can add more logic. But basically, we don't want to try and see if it's a stage intro, if it's match begin, or more importantly, hit this else. Okay, if the match state is default, that means that the game has just launched. We haven't entered a mode or anything where the start key is relevant. So we can press it, and in cases like the press any key screen, it will still work just fine. But we want to make sure that we are not pausing the game in this else if the match state is default. Alternatively, you can check else if match state not equal default, and for all cases that don't hit this if or else, and if it's not default, it will go into here. So you have a few different methods you can use here. This is just the one I'm going with for now, because I think it's the simplest. All right, that will fix your little pause menu on the main menu bug. And now let's go and finalize our event. So we need to go to our game mode blueprint. So I have my default game mode BP. We never use the skip character intros. As I said, you could set that up for any number of things. We haven't used it yet. And we did the pause game in the previous episode. But we never filled out skip stage intro until today. So now what we want to do is make sure that we can actually call skip stage intro, but we need to call it in the appropriate spot. Remember, when you're using an interface, you have to know what class or what object reference you're going to be calling this function on. In this case, our level blueprints are the ones with the function. The side-scroller example map and the Trail of the Wise level BP. So to get this to work properly, we We need to actually call it on the level that we want to skip on. So in our skip stage intro, what I do is I get our game instance. Now you may have noticed that I'm not using the game instance reference here, which is a little bit strange, but that's because that's actually set in the level streamed in event. Now this event is technically being called from multiple places and can be called multiple times at this point. So it's very possible that you actually will want to move out this base game instance setting here. And instead of doing it on the level streamed in event, let's see. You can actually drag all of this out right here. We can drag out these nodes right here. Okay, and you can still do your rematch logic. You can still pass that in to the get all actors of class. I'm going to bring everything over. And I'll drag this in. This is just because we don't need to set this game instance reference multiple times. It's kind of ugly if we do that. So instead, just to make it a little bit neater for us, I think above this event will do well. If we go up here, we can just type begin play. And now we'll have that reference set, and this variable will also be set on begin play, not when the level is streamed in. I'll even go ahead and straighten that up. That technically makes it a little bit cleaner, makes it so this isn't set multiple times. That is good, that is an improvement. But regardless, you don't really have to do this. This is just a performance thing, and because it was bugging me when I was making this episode. If you do go ahead and do that, then you can use that reference as opposed to the standardized cast we have here. So I just get my game instance reference variable, convert to validated get. Then I can just drag this in. Nice and easy. The game instance reference has something called level to load. This is something we set up in the level streaming episodes because we needed to know what level we were going to stream in and what levels we had to stream out. So, assuming you have that, if not, you can use this video right here. I'll link an iCard to it because it is important that you have this variable so that you can get the name. You could also hard code the name, so you don't really need to do that if you're not doing level streaming, but just to prove my point, you have this level to load. This is just a name, so it's going to be the name of the level. Then you can type get streaming level, and the editor will actually find the level reference based off of what you pass to it. Okay, so if we pass in this name and it finds that level streamed in or a level that we can stream in from the persistent level, then it will return this object reference. And assuming that that is valid, we can then call the skip stage intro function on it. And that will call the one in these level blueprints. It'll call this event right here. Now the only thing you have to be careful of is when you're calling this function, you have to call skip stage intro, but you have the event and the message. Now we're not filling out the logic here. We don't want to call the event and fill out that. We want to actually call the message, call the function. So you get the message and you pass the get streaming level into it. What this will do, as I said, is it will call that function in the level BP. So now when we play the game, we can go here. We can launch the Trail of the Wise, for example. And now I press the skip button. That fires. It calls the function on the level blueprint. And then we are able to skip our stage intros. So there you go, guys. That's how you can get that set up and working. That way you can skip stage intros and you don't have to watch it every single time. Even though they are cool and I like them, they get really tedious really fast when you have to watch them and they're several seconds long and you're trying to debug something. You don't want to keep seeing it. So that makes your life a lot easier and more convenient. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do. I just really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for everything. I'm really grateful, and I'm really happy that you guys are excited about these episodes week after week. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. Be happy to get you sorted with any problems that you had. Like I said, guys, that's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.